Better on the table. Welcome, everybody, to meeting number 36 of the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Pursuant to Standing Order 81.5, Supplementary Estimates B 2016-2017, referred to the committee on Thursday, November 3rd, 2016. We have appearing before us the Honourable Navdeep Bains, Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. So we're just going to get right into it. And we have our...
Deputy Minister, and I'll
there we go.
acknowledge them in my
Associate
remarks
Deputy
as well.
Minister Kelly Gillis and John Newbley?
Many names, but he goes by Newbley.
Newbley, Deputy Minister. Without further ado, Mr. Bains.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'm delighted to be here again. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces and a few new faces as well. And again, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to address this esteemed committee. I'd like to welcome my ministerial colleague who will be joining you in the next hour, Dr. Kirsty Duncan, who will update you on her role and her mandate as the Minister of Science. And not here today, but an integral part of our ministerial team is the Honourable Bardish Chagger. In addition to her critical role as Government House Leader, Minister Chagger is working with us to drive economic growth in the small business and tourism sectors. And I'd also like to acknowledge, as you were saying at the beginning, but I was having fun at your expense, Chair, my Deputy Minister John Newbley and Kelly Gillis, our Associate Deputy Minister. I've been invited, as you mentioned, to update the committee on the content of the latest round of supplementary estimates we tabled recently. Innovation, Science and Economic Development, the ISED portfolio, is presenting an increase of $409.6 million, resulting mainly from new funding under Budget 2016. The highlights are the $249.3 million to the Post-Secondary Institution Strategic Investment Fund to enhance and modernize research facilities on Canadian campuses, $64.8 million to support investigator-led research under the Research Support Fund and the Grants and Scholarships Program, and $40.6 million to the Canada First Research Excellence Fund. And I suspect my colleague, Minister Duncan, will speak to these specific investments. We also invested $20.8 million to support internships under the Youth Employment Strategy and $10 million to support cutting-edge research and development through the European Space Agency's Advanced Research in Telecommunications Systems Program.
I'd also like to give the committee an idea of what we've been up to since my last appearance here in April. My main focus has been leading the development of an inclusive innovation agenda.
Growth by making Canada a global leader in innovation. It will create well-paying jobs for the middle class and for those working hard to join it. The first and most important phase in developing this plan was to hear from Canadians, because as you know, Chair and colleagues, the government does not have a monopoly on good ideas. Over the summer, we held 28 roundtable discussions, and we invited Canadians to visit our website from coast to coast and to comment on social media. In all, we received more than 1,500 ideas on how to make Canada a global leader in innovation. And I want to take this opportunity to quickly highlight three themes that came from those conversations and those discussions. First, we heard about the need for more people with the right skills and experience to drive innovation. Deuxièmement, nous avons entendu qu'il...
Secondly, we heard about the need to harness emerging technologies in order to achieve big things.
Told us it was important to develop the next generation of globally competitive companies. In the coming months, those ideas will help inform our government's work as we prepare the budget. And it's also worth noting, le budget de 2016 a prévu de...
It's also worth noting that Budget 2016 made several important down payments in support of the innovation agenda.
And college campuses across the country. And the budget also committed $800 million over the next 4 years to strengthen innovation networks and clusters. And more than $1 billion is being invested in the development of clean technologies. These are bold investments designed to drive economic growth through innovation and create, again, good quality jobs for the middle class. The consultation process for the innovation agenda has given me the opportunity to travel many communities across the country. Dans ces déplacements, je suis toujours impressionné.
I am always impressed during these visits with the work being done by our regional development agencies to support the economic growth of communities across the country.
Has chosen to align all the regional development agencies under one portfolio. And the goal is, and I've said this on numerous occasions, and I'm glad we are succeeding in doing this, is to elevate their importance and make them part of our government's overall agenda for economic growth. And I'm pleased to report that this change has resulted in the alignment of priorities and best practices amongst the agencies. The focus of these agencies now includes developing young companies, so we want to have a strong pipeline of companies, but we want to identify opportunities for these companies to scale up and grow. One of the key themes we heard from Canadians. Diversifying our regional economy still remains a priority because we understand the unique nature of each of the respective regions, and promoting clean technology and supporting our Indigenous communities. Ce thème de la collaboration inspire tout ce que fait notre gouvernement.
This theme of collaboration informs all of our actions as a government.
Of my provincial and territorial counterparts. These are the first meetings of this kind in 12 years. It sets a new tone for constructive engagement. So again, we recognize not only do we not have a monopoly on good ideas, but it's going to require a collective effort, and it's important that we work with our provincial and territorial and municipal counterparts. That spirit and that partnership also resulted in the Atlantic Growth Strategy, which we launched over the summer. And this strategy will target actions to stimulate the economy of all 4 Atlantic provinces. Another historic result of our collaboration with the provinces and territories is our work to renew our framework for internal trade. We are on the cusp of concluding negotiations for a new Canada Free Trade Agreement. Cet accord fournira.
This agreement will provide an ambitious, progressive, and modern framework for the free flow of goods and services within Canada's borders.
To conclude this agreement is all the more significant at a time when the rest of the world is talking about putting up more barriers to trade. And we recognize that rise in protectionism. Une autre valeur essentielle à
Another key value of this government is inclusion.
Corporate transparency and diversity. Among other things, Bill C-25 aims to increase the number of underrepresented groups on corporate boards and senior management teams. Corporations will be required to make public their diversity policies, and those corporations without diversity policies will have to explain why they don't have one. While we know that security regulators have focused on gender diversity policies, this law goes farther. The goal is to attract the best and brightest from as wide a talent pool as possible. That's how Canada can make full use of the competitive advantage granted to us by the extraordinary diversity that we have and by our population. When we say diversity is our strength, we really truly need to take advantage of that. Also on the idea of inclusion, we've taken steps to bridge the digital divide. In today's modern age, it is critical that all Canadians have access to the internet. En particulier, les Canadiens.
In particular, Canadians in rural and northern regions need better access to high-speed internet.
Can unlock tremendous economic potential, leading to the creation of new jobs, products, and businesses. And I know this issue is of interest to committee members, and I've heard many of you reach out to me about this. And I'm pleased to let you know that very soon we will be launching Connect to Innovate. This $500 million investment will extend high-speed internet service to rural and remote communities. And because we know that inclusion and diversity mean casting a broad net in our search for talent, we recently announced Canada's Global Skills Strategy as part of our fall economic update. Again, this is something that we heard consistently when we engaged Canadians on the innovation agenda. The number one issue was talent and people, and this is one recommendation that we heard loud and clear. This strategy is a key part of the innovation agenda. It will make it faster and easier for Canadian firms to attract the best and brightest from around the world. Global talent can drive innovation and help Canadian firms to grow and prosper, leading to more jobs, and that's the key element. This initiative will help create more Canadian jobs. Je suis enchanté de travailler.
I am excited to be working with my colleague, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, on this important initiative.
That the committee has been engaged in a study of Canada's evolving manufacturing sector. And I look forward to receiving your report. I know a lot of hard work and effort being put into that initiative, and we really look forward to the recommendations that you will be presenting. I note with interest that the Canadian manufacturers and exporters have set the ambitious target of doubling Canada's manufacturing output and value-added exports within 15 years. Le gouvernement est prêt à agir comme
The government stands ready to be a meaningful partner to strengthen this foundational sector.
The agenda will address many of the challenges faced by the manufacturing sector in today's global and digital economy. The innovation agenda will make the most of partnerships with universities and colleges to advance research and development. It will enable the commercialization of promising research into new products and services, and it will work with industry to make skills and training a priority. Dans l'année à venir,
in the year ahead, my officials and I will work with Canadians to finalize and implement the innovation agenda.
To reinforce the independence of Statistics Canada. We've already reinstated the mandatory long-form census, a decision that was received with great enthusiasm by Canadians. And the 2016 census results reflect that enthusiasm with an unprecedented response rate of 97.8%, Mr. Chair. We will also continue to work with our regional development agencies to make strategic investments that diversify and strengthen the economies of each part of this great country. As well, we will continue to support key sectors that drive economic growth and innovation. Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, je suis fier de servir.
Mr. Chair, colleagues, I am proud to serve a government that listens to Canadians and responds to their needs.
Partnership-driven approach to innovation, and I think the results we've achieved during our first year point to that effectiveness of this approach. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister Baines, for your opening comments. And we're going to move right into questions from Mr. Sheehan. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Minister Baines, for that presentation. Appreciate that. My first question is going to be around the Post-Secondary Institution Strategic Investment Fund. Recently, you had visited the riding of Sault Ste. Marie and had announced $5 million for Sault College, almost $3 million for Algoma University, and $5 million for the Shinwuk Trust for the Aboriginal Discovery Centre. And I thank you for that. So I have a great interest in this particular program. And in the report, it talks about $249.3 million extra to that particular fund. Can you talk about the short, medium, long-term gains that this amount of money could achieve?
Thank you very much for that question. And as per our last budget, one of the key investments we made as part of our overall innovation agenda, as part of our overall demonstration that we want to step up our game when it comes to building that partnership model that I talked about in my concluding remarks, was how do we create a better collaborative environment with our universities and colleges and academic institutions from coast to coast to coast. So we introduced a $2 billion strategic investment fund that you alluded to, and that I was very fortunate to make some local announcements in the Sioux, and was really well received by the college and university and by the Aboriginal community. And the objective of that fund is not only do we make these investments, but we want to leverage the provinces and the territories, and also the institutions. And the hope is that $2 billion actually turns into $4 billion, and when it's properly leveraged from across different levels of government across the country. And the objective of that, again, is to help really create world-class facilities, to really help focus on areas where we can innovate, to create an environment where Canadian students have some of the best opportunities to learn in the state-of-art facilities where they do research, and to also allow us the ability to attract some top talent from around the globe as well. And that's what I was talking about, the global skills strategy. Also, the benefit with that is the short-term jobs created with infrastructure. So as you put the shovels in the ground and you make these investments, that'll create short-term jobs as well, and also creates an environment to, again, focus on areas around STEM, for instance, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, where we can create long-term jobs as well. The objective of this initiative was to make sure that not only do we make these investments, but they will be complete by 2018. And the original allocation of the funding of this $2 billion was $494 million in the first year, $1.25 billion in the second year, and $245 million in year 3. But because we worked very closely and we have a really good working relationship with our provinces and territories, we had to adjust the program funding profile to $744 million in the first year. So that includes the supplementary estimates numbers that you see here, plus what was in supplementary estimates A, Schedule A. So when you combine the two, that's roughly $744 million in the first year, and $995 million in the second year, and we're still maintaining our target for year 3 at $245 million. So this again speaks to the fact that we have a program that's really well received by the academic institutions. We have a really good working relationship with our province and territories. We're getting the money out in a timely manner to create jobs, and we're also strengthening our academic institutions to help Canadians who are studying domestically and to allow us to attract some of the best and brightest, which is so critical in terms of the talent piece of our innovation agenda.
Thank you very much. Next question is in regards to as well this upcoming year we're going to be celebrating Dr. Roberta Bondar's 25th anniversary as Canada's first woman in space. And I noted in your report the $10 million to support the cutting-edge research and development through the European Space Agency Advanced Research and Technology Systems Program. Could you explain exactly what kind of benefits that would have for that particular program?
So as you know, the Canadian Space Agency received an investment of $379 million in our 2016 budget. This was a significant investment in space, and we connected it with our commitment to aerospace as well, because there's a lot of innovation taking place in this sector. And that commitment was really a reflection of our long-term plan on the International Space Station, and looking forward to how we can continue to work with NASA and other partners and allies to make sure that we have a presence when it comes to space. You know, we take a lot of pride in the Canadarm and how that has direct applications now in industry. For example, a lot of that technology, a lot of the robotics is being used at the surgery table in our hospitals, for example. And so we're seeing not only these applications in space, but direct correlation in some of the key sectors like the healthcare sector in Canada. So that $10 million commitment that we have that you alluded to with respects to the advanced research in telecommunication systems, that's really with respects to what we're doing with our European allies. And the idea, again, is how can we collaborate on research and development, and we want to provide an opportunity for our industry in particular and our SMEs to have access to that R&D so they can be on the cutting edge of new solutions, that they can be able to compete with some of those new technologies. And so that's what the major benefit of this initiative is to create that R&D partnership so it benefits industry as well. Because one of the challenges we have, and we see this across different sectors, mind you, space and aerospace are the exceptions, we're seeing a decline by Canadian companies in research and development. So we feel now is an opportunity to government to show leadership in this area, and this $10 million investment with Europe really helps us build that partnership with industry so they have access to research and development.
That's good. 1 minute. Very quickly, I guess, just with the minute left, you also met with a number of companies around the clean tech industry in Sault Ste. Marie while you were there. If you wish to expand a little bit on the support that's available and just the time remaining for all companies in Canada.
So as you know, our government has been very clear that we want to reach our ambitious targets to achieve our climate change goals in Paris at COP21. But we recognize that now more than ever, we have a responsibility to explain that the environment and the economy go hand in hand. And that when we're trying to achieve these targets, we can actually create an economy that creates jobs. So it's not simply about the environment, but it's the environment connected to the economy in a meaningful way. You know, we talk about blue-collar jobs or white-collar jobs, but we also have a responsibility to promote green-collar jobs. And these jobs prevail in every single sector. So when we were in the Sioux, we saw how this prevailed in so many different sectors, not only in renewable, but how even companies were more efficient in terms of their use of energy and how they were being more efficient in terms of the outcomes that we're getting. So to keep that in mind, we made an investment of $1 billion.
Point of order, point of order, Mr. Chair. I believe we're about 20 some odd seconds over, and unfortunately that'll end up hurting the New Democrats' opportunity to ask some questions to the minister.
Mr. Baines, we're going to move on.
That we invested or allocated in the budget in clean technology speaks to the fact that we want to build partnerships. That the government already, for example, ranks 9th amongst the OECD countries when it comes to government-led R&D with industry. We want to continue to send a clear signal to the market that a low-carbon economy is a priority for this government. It's not only good for the environment, good for our health, but it's also good for creating jobs as well. And just to put things in perspective, I had the opportunity to travel to India to take a mission there to really take our information communication technology.
Have to cut you off there.
Yeah, and long story short,
point of order.
Long story short, there was a lot of pollution there, and they're excited about some of these technologies coming from the Sioux.
Yes, point of order.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want a clarification. The minister was late to the meeting here, and we've gone over time for the government's time. I want to be ensured that I do get my full allocation of minutes at this committee hearing today. Is that going to be guaranteed by yourself to make sure that I get that? It's not to my fault. I was here, and the time allocation is there. I want to make sure that I have my time. Can you clarify at this point in time to ensure that's going to be the case?
Well, that will depend on how the rest of the meeting goes, I guess.
So it'll just depend upon whether or not you extend time for
the more time that we have
this conversation. Well, don't blame me now. It's basically it's out of the door
anything.
Because we didn't start on time, and then at the same time as you send a time that we're allowing the minister. So it's hard to blame me now for intervening because I'm losing time.
We're going to move right on to Mr. Nuttall, please.
Thank you, and Mr. Minister, you'll be happy to know I don't have any motions to table today. And I also want to say thank you for taking the time to join us and for the work and service that you do for our country. I hope that you'll realize it's not me being rude if I do interrupt you. I only have 7 minutes, and I want to ensure that I'm respectful to the people I represent in those 7 minutes. So in 2016, it said that the innovation agenda would be released within 1 year. That was obviously in March of this year. We are 400 days plus since the election, and I was wondering if you can give us an exact date for this to be released.
Very much for asking the question. As you know, the innovation agenda is a core part of my mandate, and it really speaks to our government's commitment with respects to not only investments in infrastructure, but looking at innovation policies to drive growth and to really create opportunities for businesses to succeed. And as I mentioned in my remarks, we went out to Canadians in June to engage them to get their feedback. We had unprecedented support, over 1,500 submissions. After we received that, I've gone back out in very public forums to talk about the feedback that we received. I highlighted those 3 elements around people and technologies and helping companies scale up. And I alluded very clearly that this is going to be an essential part of our budget process and should be integrated into our budget development process.
So will it be released prior to the next budget? And will it be released before March 31st, 2017?
So I'm very confident that many of the feedback that we receive from Canadians will be reflected in our budget, but there's a process that's entailed. I'm working very closely with the Minister of Finance and my colleagues, and the hope is to have a lot of these ideas reflected in that.
So we are over a year in. There is no plan that is being put before the Canadian people with regards to jobs. But last week we had the Premier of Northwest Territories in committee, and he said that his goal was 36,000 new jobs over the next 15 years. So, Minister, what is your goal for job creation for the next year? Number of jobs That's all I'm looking for.
Yeah, so first of all, just to correct the record, we made significant down payment on the innovation agenda. I talked about the $2 billion investment with universities and colleges. That is a significant investment with regards to innovation that was in our 2016 budget that we rolled out in advance of the original timetable that we had. We're getting those investments out more quickly. We also committed $500 million for broadband connectivity, which I alluded to in my remarks, which again
Mr.
is
Minister,
another...
how many jobs? That's what I'm
No,
asking.
but I'm getting there, but I wanted to also clear the record because you said we did nothing on the innovation agenda, and I felt it's important for me to highlight just a couple of key aspects. I won't go through the long list that we have in terms of the innovation elements of it. The other quick item is the $500 million that we invested for broadband connectivity. So again, this is something that will benefit rural and remote communities. And just to put things in perspective, the government works with industry, we work with businesses to create conditions for job growth. And based on StatsCan information and the work that we've done so far since we've taken government, we've created 139,600 jobs in conjunction with industry and academia and other levels of government. And a lot of those jobs have been from coast to coast to coast.
Thank you. So net new jobs are at 0, and you don't have a goal that you're willing to at least tell us for the next year.
No, I just highlighted the jobs that were
do you believe
created
that
and
the
will continue
CIP
to go on that
150
trend line.
funds are being distributed fairly around the country?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Do you believe that the CIP 150 funds, Canada 150 funds, are they being distributed fairly across the country?
Again, we evaluate those case-by-case basis. They're based on a very clear criteria that's been established, and we look at the merits based on that, and that's how we determine if they meet the requirements.
Is one of the criteria that it's a Liberal riding?
Pardon?
Is one of the criteria that it's a Liberal riding?
No, the criteria is, for example, focus on diversity, focus on young people, Aboriginal, focusing on celebrating Canada's 150th anniversary.
So, of the $30 million that's being spent, $28 million went to Liberal ridings. Of the CIP funds that have been put out in terms of contracts, 31, the highest number of contracts awarded, were awarded in your area of Brampton, Mississauga. Do you think that this is a fair allocation of the resources the Canadian people give the Canadian government?
So we have a very robust process. I'm very confident in the process that evaluates these projects. These projects are based again on what we receive, based on the criteria that we set aside to celebrate Canada's 150th anniversary. That's how we allocate the funding, sir.
So you think it's appropriate that 28 out of $30 million, 90% of the funds have gone to Liberal-held ridings?
Which 30 million are you alluding to? Because the Canada 150 is a $150 million commitment, sir. So 30 million seems to be a number that doesn't coincide with that amount, sir.
Ontario, sir.
Yeah, because I was about to say when you say 30, right? So you're talking about Ontario. Yep. Okay, so of that 30 million, what was your question, sir?
Do you think it's fair that 28 of $30 million, is that a fair number?
I think the funding allocation should be based on criteria and merit, and that's what I've been very clear with my officials, and that's exactly how we've deployed those funds, sir.
Okay, earlier this year, I put forward a motion to have the committee investigate the carbon tax and the effect on our economy. We know how much it's going to pull out of the economy, about $36 billion a year. Is there money set aside in the supplementals to help Canadians who lose their jobs when this new tax is implemented?
So our government's been very clear in putting a price on pollution. We think that drives innovation. As the minister responsible for innovation, science, and economic development, we recognize that we need more money in R&D. We need to find new solutions so we can not only help create a cleaner environment in Canada, but become more export-oriented. So keeping that in mind, we've really worked with our regional development agencies to target and focus investments in clean technology. That's one area. We've also allocated $1 billion in our budget to help, again, make investments in clean technologies. The idea is the government has a meaningful role to play and to develop a partnership to create jobs. We're really focused on growth and clean growth and jobs and maintaining, enhancing our quality standard of living, sir.
So on that, you just earlier just said that governments aren't in the business of creating jobs, they're in the business of creating the environment for jobs, and then you've said that the government has a meaningful role to play in creating jobs, but you won't say how many jobs you hope to create next year. So will you tell us how many jobs you're expecting the carbon tax to kill in the next 5 years so that we can include that in our estimates of where the economy is going?
I believe putting a price on pollution drives innovation, which improves our productivity and competitiveness, which creates robust growth and creates jobs. Based on that philosophy, we've already worked with industry and other sectors, other levels of government to create 139,600 jobs since we've taken office. We believe we'll maintain that level of momentum, but I also acknowledge there's other global factors at play. Canada is not an island. It really depends on global growth. It depends on how other markets operate. But I'm confident that we have strong policies in place, investments in infrastructure, as I alluded to, $180 billion, which is significant to creating jobs, and of course the innovation agenda, which will create jobs as well, sir.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Massey. 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here. It's a very difficult job that you have. You cover a lot of files. There's no doubt about that. But in your remarks, I do want to get clear in terms of where you stand as an individual and just definitions over what do you mentioned about well-paying jobs in middle class. Like, how do you define a well-paying job? What is it yourself and your ministry looking for in terms of a remuneration for an employment? In terms of trying to create jobs here, how do you define what that means?
So my definition of good quality job is, do you see individuals have an opportunity to do better going forward? So the idea is the status quo is okay, but they can do better. And so how do we create opportunities for people to continue to grow and earn more money? That's really what I'm focused on. I'm focused on when it comes to jobs, and I'm focused when it comes to even companies or high growth firms. We're always looking for opportunities for people to make more money, to earn more money, and obviously that is a key point.
Okay, well,
key part of our criteria.
Yeah, with all due respect, I think that, like jobs like that, for me, it's, whether or not you can pay a mortgage, whether you can send your kids to university or college, whether you have the right to participate in the general economy. And that's one of the reasons why I'm more particular in terms of my region, concerned about the fall of the auto industry. We've dropped to 10th, and as I mentioned in the House of Commons today, and as well too is that you mentioned about your upcoming, trade mission to India, and I worry about a national auto strategy. And here's the reason, Mr. Minister, is that I was approached the other day at a hockey rink by a gentleman who's actually training. He's an engineer. He's training someone from India who's come over to basically take his job. And the concern I have is these different trade missions that we have, and whether or not they lead to the value-added jobs back in our country. And engineering is a pretty significant value-added job. He works in a high needed area. He designs and manufactures for manufacturing auto parts. And meanwhile, he's training the person who's come over to Canada to take his job. So what do I say to someone like that who's losing their job? And do you actually review these trips and have that been done in terms of a full auditing of what comes to return and what we lose? And what do we say to that person right now? Because I'll see him this week.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that question because I have two perspectives on that. First of all, with respects to the challenges in Windsor and within southwestern Ontario around the auto sector, it is a really important file for myself and for this government, and we have a plan. That is why we extended the Automotive Innovation Fund. That is why we're actively engaged with companies and the Automotive Supplier Innovation Fund. That is why, for example, if you look at the supplementary B estimates, we have an amount allocated here for the Automotive Innovation Fund and Automotive Innovation Office. That's really to create the Investment Attraction Office. And all these are part of a game plan that we have to work with the auto sector, to work with labor, to bring in investments and create jobs. So what I would say is this: if you speak to labor, if you speak to the companies, they recognize the government stepped up its game.
I'm speaking
and we're making
to a father who's got a child in hockey, and those are great. But the thing is, why aren't those funds being exhausted or used by the companies then?
They will be, as you know, as these investment arrangements with the companies and with the unions are now starting to unfold. We were very much engaged with the unions, very much engaged with the companies, and we're going to be at the table. We want to participate. We're going to deploy these funds. We want to create jobs. Look, if you look at...
But aren't you concerned that we actually have jobs that are value-added that we're trying to attract that are now going to other countries? That's what's happening.
No, I think that's a challenge. So this is what I think: the rise of protectionism and some of the rhetoric we heard in the U.S., for example, and what we saw with Brexit speaks to that thinking. And I understand the anxieties around that, and I understand the challenges. I'm not being dismissive of that at all. But I do fundamentally believe, as a country of 35 million people, if we are to succeed, maintain our standard of living, and grow, we need to bring in investments. We need to focus and build partnerships with industry to create jobs. And the fact that our government has played a more active role in doing that, I think sends a clear signal that we're open for business, open to ideas, open to people, open to investments, which is good for job creation.
With all that being said, though, wouldn't a national auto policy work in terms of the current thing that we're doing now? And Duguid from Ontario has been very clear dismissing that idea. Wouldn't a national auto strategy, it's being called for by the union, and by the way, it was the workers, and I think it's an important point, is when workers went into negotiations, they chose the future for jobs for other people than their own monetary returns. So they said to the companies and to their union that they wanted those jobs protected for the future, not extra raises or benefits. So they got $1 billion on the table, and we haven't seen that use in the past taken place. And so we have the chambers of commerce on side, we have the auto companies on side, and some of those companies don't have the senior officials. The presidents don't come from Canada anymore. Wouldn't a national auto policy be at least the logical way to approach and to go this? And why would your colleague not support that in Ontario? And do you support a national auto policy being called by others?
So I think what people want is action. All right, I think what people want is a government playing a meaningful role and delivering results. Just to highlight that, and you mentioned the questions you raised about the auto file in the House of Commons, I too have had the opportunity to talk about GM Canada and the 1,000 engineers that are coming to Canada. So
yeah, but that was done with no government money. There was no government money in that.
No, you were asking about engineering before, sir, so I just wanted to highlight that. So those 1,000 engineering jobs are coming to Canada because the car of the future is being built in Canada.
Yeah,
and
but that's a bad example. That's not the innovation funds. That's a bad example.
No,
because
but I think it speaks to the engineering anxiety of the individual that we talked about that, right?
And I don't mean to be interrupted, but you weren't involved when you're raising about 1,000 jobs that had no government participation at all. That's a serious problem versus the plan that you can create.
If you ask GM and you ask them why they made that investment in Canada, they said because of the innovation policies that exist here, because of the talent pool access that they have, both from a domestic academic perspective and through immigration policies, the fact that we have 700 suppliers, the fact that we have 40 academic institutions that have some sort of relationship when it comes to the auto file, the fact that we have the second largest automotive jurisdiction in North America. Those are the reasons why, and they know that there's a government that's going to be at the table working with them, making investments. That is why GM Canada is making those investments. That is why we have
okay, but
going
do you believe in a national auto policy?
I believe in a government that's going to take meaningful action to bring results, and that's exactly what we're doing on the Automotive Innovation Fund, the Automotive Supplier Innovation Fund, the amount of money that we've included here for an attractment office. We're competing with Mexico and the U.S. and other jurisdictions.
In fact,
and I can tell you right now, this year was a very historic year.
It's the platinum age of automotive. It's not the golden age anymore. We have driverless vehicles, we have autonomous vehicles, we have new technology, we have record investment across the globe, and Canada's dropping like a stone in a spiral of death related to the auto industry. And that's the reality when you actually start looking at the facts of it, and you see ourselves at 10th in the world globally. And so I don't understand why you can't, join a national auto strategy type program and show leadership over, the auto industry is not just Ontario. It's across this country.
Of course, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to have to jump in.
Just very quickly, Chair, if I may, just on the concluding remarks, we are showing leadership.
Okay.
The auto sector is very important to this government. It's a priority. We've made investments in the budgets to reflect that, and I look forward to working with my colleague as we go to the Detroit Auto Show and in Toronto and other places where we can work together in a nonpartisan manner to bring investments here in Canada.
Thank you very much. And we're going to move to Mr. Arya. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, I think we have quite excellent programs to support research and development and hardly any programs to support commercialization. Are you proposing any measures to rectify this?
So that is a clear gap that we have. We're really, really good. If you look at the innovation ecosystem, if you look at the innovation pipeline, we're really good at basic research, and that's very important. I mean, we could do better, and I have a feeling my colleague Minister Duncan will speak eloquently to that. We're really good at coming up with ideas, but the challenge is how do we commercialize those ideas? Too often the case is individuals, for example, that come up with the ideas are also responsible for the marketing plan or the business plan, and they should be focusing primarily on the innovation and the invention and the solution, and not necessarily for figuring out the business and the marketing plan. And that's kind of the challenge that we've had. So we as a government obviously have taken many initiatives to support through the Strategic Investment Fund as an example of how we can create an ecosystem of startup companies that to help them commercialize. But one area that I must confess we ought to do better and we're not doing better is really helping scale up companies and helping those commercial ideas become global champions. And so that's an area that we are looking at, and we will provide some solutions in that area with regards to commercialization, because clearly there's a gap there when it comes to our innovation agenda.
Thank you. And the second is, one of the matter of concerns is the shrinking in size of number of medium-sized businesses. And especially in manufacturing, that is a real big concern. For us to have very large companies, I think we should start with these small companies, the manufacturing startups. A lot of manufacturing startups have very difficulty in getting funding. You know, manufacturing startups is quite capital intensive. It is not like setting up a small company to start, say, some new software program.
Right.
So are you got any plans to address this problem?
So the issue of patient capital is really important. The issue of providing long-term support for a lot of these capital-intensive manufacturing initiatives is really critical. That's an area we're definitely looking at. We're working very closely with BDC. I believe they can do a better job in that area. I know that you've highlighted that challenge to me on numerous conversations, and I understand your concern, and I've relayed that to the team there as well. But I also believe, for example, when it comes to the clean tech sector, that is very similar in nature, where it requires a lot of capital, long-term patient assistance and support. So we're looking at measures to provide that, because we need to be able to see those companies grow and succeed, and there is a cash crunch. And what we're also focusing on is high growth firms. So you're saying the challenges around the medium-sized companies. I'm saying even our larger companies are having difficulty really growing at times. If you look at all the companies that we have, high growth firms, the ones that have 20% year-over-year growth for 3 years in a row, is only about 3.5% that have that kind of growth potential. So we need the right data to identify those companies, and then we need to look at all the different tools that we have to be able to help them grow and succeed, from government procurement to patient capital financing, for example, looking at how we can really help them with my colleague, the Minister of International Trade, to brand them internationally, to the new investment agency that we put forward. So we're really focused on this. We're really focused not just on medium-sized companies, I must confess. Any company that has enormous growth potential, if small, medium, or large, we want to target those companies in particular to help them succeed and grow.
Yeah, I'm glad you remember the problems I mentioned regarding the BDC. Across Canada during the last 12 months, they have funded only 180 small-sized manufacturing companies. Going on, you know, whenever we talk of manufacturing sector here, a lot of discussions take place around auto, aerospace, and telecom sectors. They are quite important for in Canadian context, no doubt about it. But I do feel that we need to focus on the advanced manufacturing, those sectors that will become more relevant in 5, 10, 15 years in the future. Say additive manufacturing or robotics or even chemistry industry. Chemistry industry is supposed to be old sector, but a lot of investments are taking place in the United States in the chemistry industry. Or one of the emerging things for a place like Ottawa is the defense C4ISR industries. If your ministry can do some studies and publish this information for a lot of small companies, a lot of entrepreneurs regarding the potential that is available in these sectors, that will be quite helpful.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that feedback, and we'll definitely take that into consideration, and I'll follow up with my team to make sure that we can implement that example.
Yeah.
But again, you're absolutely right. We have an area where we can show global leadership. You know, I talk about artificial intelligence, which has a vertical capability, and there's a lot of good work being done across different jurisdictions in the country, additive manufacturing, quantum computing. So there's a lot of big data, a lot of these initiatives that will help in the manufacturing sector. These are technologies that are emerging globally as well, and we as a government recognize that's important. The 3 areas that we heard back from Canadians, first obviously was people and talent. The second is really the adoption and really the commercialization of these technologies. How do we take these technologies to be more productive, to be more efficient and more competitive? And that's really a focus of our government.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to share my time with Mr. Francis.
I'll just throw first one. If you could elaborate a bit more on the Valley of Death issues and how you're looking at that, that would be appreciated.
So you're absolutely right. There's like multiple valleys of death, unfortunately, for companies as they're continuing to start and grow and then scale up and then become export-oriented and ultimately become true global successes. So what we've done is we've really looked at those gaps in areas, and there's different areas and challenges that they face. One is, as I mentioned earlier, the challenges around acquiring talent. Too often they need a good CEO or someone who has the ability to write a business plan or marketing plan. So that's the first challenge. Do they have access to the appropriate talent, the skill sets? Do they recognize they need that? That's one area that we're focused on. Second is patient capital and financing. We recognize that's another area that's a challenge because in order for them to grow, they need that support. One area that we're looking at proactively as a government to be able to assist them is procurement. The government really has an opportunity to validate a lot of these companies that are starting off with new ideas, new technologies, new solutions, to validate those ideas. So when they go abroad, they can say, look, we do business with Canada. And that allows them to succeed internationally as well. So those are the types of gaps we've identified. There's many more. I know I'm tight on time, but that's what we're trying to address in our innovation agenda.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to Mr. Loeb. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Minister. First question I have for you is you talked about the rural broadband strategy. Do you have a speed that you could tell the committee that you're giving your department to target towards, minimum speed?
So, as you're very well aware, we had an initiative called Connecting Canadians, and this was launched by the previous.
No, I'm just talking about.
Yeah, I'm just giving you context. Speed. I'm just giving you context to the speed question. So, Connecting Canadians program, and they had targets of 10 megabits per second, for example. That's what they were targeting in the past. What we're trying to focus on our $500 million initiative is fiber, and fiber to the institutes, fiber for the last mile. So we're saying, look, in order.
So when you mean fiber to the last mile, do you mean fiber to every last farm? Is that what you're actually saying with the last mile?
What we're saying is that we're developing a program that will have those different dimensions to it. Ultimately, the investment that we're talking about, the $500 million, that fiber to an institute or potentially to a local home, is all about making sure that we have support from the private sector. The way this model will be designed is to make sure the government plays a role.
No, but I'm interested in your definition to the last mile, because I've sat around enough tables and talked to people about what the definition of the last mile is. So if your definition of a last mile is a municipal building, I think you're wrong. What is your definition of last mile? 5 megabits per second. Is it to a farm? Is it to a rural light manufacturing facility? What exactly is it?
So as I said, fiber to the institute would be like schools and universities and hospitals. That's how I define that, and that's the commitment that we made in our budget. Last mile does speak to exactly what you alluded to, someone's home, for example, in a rural remote community. So I think our definitions are fairly consistent.
Okay, well, we'll hold that to you. Next question is on the Canada 150 funding. Is it your belief that it's the best use of taxpayers' dollars to fund religious facilities such as churches and mosques?
I believe that we have a criteria that really wants to focus on promoting Canada's diversity. What we do is we make these funds available. Individuals have an opportunity to apply. There's a proper vetting process. Based on that vetting process, we get recommendations, and based on those recommendations, we approve the projects. And so I think.
Do you see a potential issue, though, with small communities in small areas trying to fix a baseball diamond, trying to fix a community center, and then they find out in the news that a church or mosque in a city receives $200,000? You see how these communities could be quite frustrated considering there's no taxes paid by these facilities.
I think the challenge is, of course, when you have $150 million allocated to celebrate Canada's 150th anniversary, and this amount of money is allocated to all the regions across the country, there's going to be a resource challenge. Yeah. So I understand there might be frustration for individuals that have applied and haven't received a successful response.
I would have suggested not funding religious facilities. That would have been a good way to spread the money around further. You mentioned NAFTA, and we know the Prime Minister's talked about reopening NAFTA. Can you name me one tariff in the manufacturing sector that you would be advocating for Canada to reduce or eliminate?
So as you know, the North American Free Trade Agreement has been placed since 1994 and has had minor changes, I think 11 changes since then.
Well, I mean, you're the industry minister. Yep. You're responsible for manufacturing this country. Just give me one tariff that you are looking at to fix up, to reduce, to make us more competitive. Just one.
We haven't gone to that stage. So my point I was going to make is with regards to the North American Free Trade Agreement is that...
So you're telling me your officials haven't mentioned one tariff in NAFTA that you would want to advocate to the Minister of International Trade on to represent manufacturers in this country? Not one.
No, I'm saying that we will always advance our national interests. I'm saying that we'll always find opportunities for our manufacturers to have greater access to the U.S. What I'm saying is that right now we're not at the stage of negotiating things at NAFTA, and it would be premature for me
well,
to
how
start
can you negotiate if you don't even know which tariff you want to eliminate? So we'll get off that one because it sounds to me like it's zero.
Okay.
Now, the next one I want to talk about is Stats Canada, okay? Stats Canada.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Can you tell me if there are any issues that are considered red light right now between Stats Canada and Shared Services Canada? Can you tell us if there's any in the red light zone right now?
Sure. As you know, and there's been a fair amount of media attention to this as well, the former chief statistician raised some issues with respect to Stats Canada and shared services.
Which was correct, by the way. If
you can allow me an opportunity to respond, sir, then I will do so.
Which he was correct.
I was patient enough to listen to you speak, so I would appreciate the opportunity to respond, and I'm doing so, and then you're more than welcome to ask another question.
We're actually out of time.
So as I was saying, that the former chief statistician raised this issue, and I'm confident that both Stats Canada and Shared Service Canada will find a solution.
Thank you. We're going to move over to Mr. Bayless. You have 5 quick minutes.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Minister. I was one of the areas that I'm quite interested in is regional economic strategy and the emphasis that we're putting on for our regional development, such as ACOA, Fed North, Fed Dev, and all that. And I was particularly happy to see the Atlantic Growth Strategy come into being. Could you speak a little bit about that and how that's going to impact the Atlantic provinces and what your thoughts are to expand that kind of a program?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that question. I mean, one of the things the Prime Minister has really done effectively is really change the tone, the tenure of this place, really create a sense of collaboration. And, to highlight that point, as I mentioned in my remarks, for the first time in 12 years, I met with my provincial and territorial counterparts to create a table on innovation and economic development. So much effort is put forward by the different provinces and territories around skills development, on infrastructure, on how to deploy broadband initiatives, and we have to do a better job of aligning that. So that spirit of cooperation is reflected overall with all the jurisdictions, but I must confess there's a really unique model that we have in Atlantic Canada. And that model really speaks to not only the ministers that I work with directly, but also the premiers. So along with my 32 MPs, again, regardless of their political affiliation in Atlantic Canada, I work with all of them. The 32 MPs, along with them, including the 4 ministers, we've actually put forward an Atlantic growth strategy. And this is really a partnership with the different the premiers of the different provinces to focus on areas of growth and what we can do to better align our resources and better grow the economy in those regions. One area that was identified by businesses, by governments, was immigration. I know that immigration has a different lens or perspective across the country, but particularly in Atlantic Canada, where they are looking for immigration to, obviously for population purposes, an aging population as potential customers. Immigration was such a key element of their economic plan going forward, and how do we retain immigrants in Atlantic Canada? So along with my colleague, the Minister of Immigration, we launched a pilot project. A project that would speak to, again, as part of the Atlantic Growth Strategy, would speak to how businesses can step up and government would help facilitate, bring forward new Canadians or immigrants to come to Canada to really help make those business investments, to deal with challenges in the job market or labor market, to provide more support for the aging population in that area. So that's a real clear example of how the provinces, how the federal government, how businesses have come together to tackle a very important issue. And I must confess, and I don't want to say too much in advance, but hopefully in January we'll be launching other initiatives as part of the Atlantic Growth Strategy to really highlight that partnership.
Yeah, it's a very impressive aspect. And then when you turn around, one of the beauties of our great country is that you come, say, for example, Fed North, Northern Ontario, and I know you were just up in Sault Ste. Marie working there, and they have completely different needs. How do you make that transition out to look at some area like, for example, Northern Ontario with Fed North?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because I have outstanding colleagues in the House of Commons from all political parties, but I must confess I see some of my colleagues a bit more often, the 7 MPs, and including Minister Haidu, who I sit in cabinet with. And we talk a lot about those challenges and opportunities. I even met with some of the large urban mayors from Northern Ontario to talk about the unique opportunities, because it's also urban and a lot of smaller and rural communities. And we're looking at, again, how to work with them on a range of issues, from infrastructure to investments in our Aboriginal communities, to focusing on young people, to help with succession planning. There's a range of initiatives and investments that we're making through FedNor, and it really is done in collaboration. It's a bottom-up approach. We deal directly with clients, we deal directly with communities to better understand their needs, to make sure we diversify the economy in a manner that allows them to grow and succeed for the long term. So it really is a bottom-up approach, and that's really the success of our agencies, and in particular FedNor is a great initiative where we're seeing a lot of that success come forward.
Rapidement, le Québec,
Oui.
le DEC, je sais que vous êtes impliqué aussi avec le...
I know that you're also involved with the DEC in Quebec. Well, you're right. I am proud of being part of such a strong team.
And we're working very closely with DEC. We have launched a range of projects, especially in rural parts of Quebec, really speaking to those diversifications and challenges around the forestry sector, for example. That's an area that we understand there's a lot of challenges. We're making investments in additive manufacturing. We're focusing a lot on, again, young people. So DEC has been really instrumental. We've deployed those funds in a very timely manner, and the response has been very positive.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Due to time constraints, here's what's going to happen. Mr. General, you've got your 5 minutes, and Mr. Massey, you will have your 2 minutes, and then we'll end it right there. Go for it, Mr. General.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I'll jump right into it, and thank you for staying a bit longer as well. The situation in Western Canada, particularly my home province in Alberta, you're a member of Parliament from Mississauga. That's all right, but you do represent a significant portion of Western Canada. We're struggling significantly since your party has taken office. Our unemployment rate has doubled. I'm not saying that's because of your party, but there has been yet some hope come towards and help Western Canada. So of all the money that you announced that you're spending across the country, we heard about the Ontario amount, but in the Western Canada and particularly Alberta, what type of ideas, what plans do you have to get people back to work? Because we're at a situation that's a crisis point. We've started an Alberta Jobs Task Force because honestly there doesn't appear to be a plan from this government. So if you can comment on that would be very helpful to me and the people that live in my province.
Thank you very much for that very thoughtful question, and I do share your concerns about the plight of challenges in Alberta in particular, and the impact that has not only to Alberta but to the Canadian economy as a whole. We're seeing the challenges to our GDP, and it's an impact that we all feel in all parts of the country. As you know, there's a lot of employees in Ontario and Atlantic Canada and other parts that worked in Alberta. So it is an issue that is of national importance to us. That is why, we immediately, recognizing the challenges in that region, we provided a stabilization fund of $250 million to deal with the direct challenges that Alberta was facing in particular. As you know, the issue was compounded by Fort McMurray. We worked along with yourself and other colleagues to provide a matching contribution to Red Cross. I had the opportunity to visit and meet with officials there to get an update as the minister responsible for Western economic diversification, and to continue to make sure that we don't neglect Fort McMurray, but we'll focus on how do we continue to rebuild that very important community and part of the economy.
Sorry, just to interrupt, Minister, it's not just Fort McMurray either.
Oh, I know, I'm just highlighting some examples. I just wanted to make sure that was an important investment, that was an important a challenge that we face and Albertans face, and I did not want to miss the opportunity to talk about that. Of course, my colleague, Minister Sohi, Minister responsible for infrastructure, made significant investments in infrastructure in Alberta, particularly in public transit, so that again will create short-term jobs and also set ourselves up for success going forward. As the minister responsible
if I could jump in on some of the infrastructure, just because you brought it up, Minister, there's we've only had one project that's actually broken shovels, broken ground in Western Canada, and that's not creating the jobs that we need. There's a number of initiatives that could be done by your government that would help to create those jobs. We're not seeing that right now. So with all the money that you've put into Western economic diversification, how many jobs are being created from that money?
Yeah, no, thank you. So on the jobs front and on infrastructure, my colleague, Minister Sohi, highlights that in the House of Commons and talks about the different investments that he's made and the jobs that are being created. But the one that I can speak to, a couple of examples, is Business Development Canada. That's a portfolio that I'm responsible for. We worked very closely with the Alberta government to inject an additional $500 million for small businesses in particular. As you know, the backbone of our economy are small and medium-sized enterprises. So availability of capital for our small businesses, individuals that have lost their jobs or thinking of starting their own business and company, need access to capital. We provided that injection of $500 million. Through, again, WD, we've invested in 46 projects, roughly worth $60.5 million. So we're really focused through economic development.
Did you have a jobs number? I saw your deputy passed a note there. Is there a jobs number with that?
Some of them are maintaining jobs, some of them are creating jobs, some of them potentially can create more jobs. The idea is that there's different aspects to this equation. Investments in infrastructure, as I mentioned, significant. Investments through BDC, significant. The stabilization funding, supporting challenges through transition through
I'm going to have to cut you off, Minister. I only have about 30 seconds, and I want this last question.
No, I'm just highlighting all the different initiatives.
I appreciate that. So Canada 150 grants, you said that they were to be, decisions were to be made within 90 days from October 26th. Doing my math, that's not, there have been no, there's still people who are wondering where their grant money is. Can you comment on Western Economic Diversification Canada 150 grants?
Yeah, so again, sometimes we receive individual requests, sometimes in batches. We're very mindful of the feedback that we need to give to potential organizations and clients and individuals. If they haven't received a response,
when they'll find out?
If they haven't received a response, they will shortly. I know that my deputy has passed me some timelines.
An hour?
But again, based on what I have here as well, is that they should receive a response very soon.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on, Mr. Massey. 2 quick, short minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Automotive Innovation Fund and the Supplier Fund and the other funds that you mentioned, does your government believe that they should be non-taxable or grants?
It's a great question because I've been asked that a few times as well. And we're very open to looking at the potential investment opportunities that present themselves because, Brian, as you know, as I mentioned before, we're competing against Mexico and southern parts of the U.S. and with the rise of protectionism what we're seeing in different jurisdictions, we really need to up our game. And so I can tell you right now we're very open. It all depends on the proposal that we get, the best value that we can get for taxpayers' dollars, the best investment that we can potentially get, and again, the opportunities for job creation. Those are the considerations that we have in mind.
Okay, fair enough. And if, say, for example, NAFTA is opened up, prior to NAFTA, we had the Auto Pact. Will you be a champion to return that trading agreement that Canada had with the United States? Because then we were actually stronger and we've dropped to 10th. So will you set goals to move Canada back up there, given the preferential trade that we had in the past?
Yeah, so my colleague, Minister Freeland, obviously would lead the discussions on the free trade aspect along with the Prime Minister, but a whole government will be engaged. I can assure you that as the minister responsible for so many key sectors across the economy, the auto sector is so critical. It employs directly and indirectly 500,000 Canadians, and that's very important. We're going to make sure that we do everything we can to maintain and enhance that footprint, and we're going to demonstrate leadership through the different initiatives that I've outlined. And any discussions we have with the U.S. or Mexico, for example, we're going to make sure that we always keep that in mind.
Point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to put on the record that we've had a very short time with the minister and recognize that in this age of making sure that women are recognized in Parliament, that neither the lady across the way nor myself had a chance to even ask one question. Because if I were allowed to ask one question, I would ask the minister when Mississauga moved to Northern Ontario.
If I may, Chair, She presented a very important aspect of, participation of women in the discussion, and then she made such a partisan jab at the end, really undermining that question. So it's very disappointing to see the member opposite trying to politicize a very important issue, which is engaging more women in politics. So it's very disappointing to see that.
We will suspend for 1 minute, being mindful of the time, so that we can set up for the second minister. Welcome back, everybody. Mindful of time, we won't be able to make it through the entire list. So we're just going to get right to it. This afternoon, we have appearing before us the Honourable Christy Duncan, Minister of Science, as well as Colette Downey, Chief Financial Officer, Corporate Management Sector, and Lawrence Hansen, Assistant Deputy Minister, Spectrum, Information Technologies and Telecommunications. Welcome. Thank you very much. And we're just going to jump right into it. Minister Duncan, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for the invitation, and I'm pleased to be here in front of your esteemed committee. Je suis ravie d'être ici aujourd'hui.
I'm delighted to be here today to speak to you about my mandate and what is being done here in Canada.
Colleagues here from ISED and our Deputy Minister, Associate Deputy Minister. Mr. Chair, last November, the Prime Minister asked me to lead on supporting research and the integration of scientific considerations into our policy choices. As the Prime Minister wrote, support for science is an essential pillar in our strategy to create sustainable economic growth and to grow the middle class. C'est très important de renforcer le rôle des sciences.
It's very important. Boosting the role of science is very important.
Scientists can and should speak freely about their work to the media and to the public. Last May, I worked with my colleague and Treasury Board President Scott Bryson in releasing a new government communications policy. The policy is clear. Subject matter experts, including scientists, can speak publicly about their work without being officially designated to do so. And to ensure federal science is fully available to the public, we are establishing a Chief Science Officer position. We will launch this search in the near future. What's more, we're breaking down the silos that prevent federal scientists from sharing their knowledge with each other as they advance shared goals, whether action on climate change, antimicrobial resistance, Arctic science, food security, or the whole of government innovation agenda. To help accomplish this, I met with deputy ministers from science-based departments and agencies at a first ever retreat this summer. I stressed to them the need to promote greater integration across portfolios and am very encouraged by our progress to date. Our 3 federal granting councils as well are key players within the scientific ecosystem. The Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. Les deux premiers conseils soutiennent.
The first 2 councils fall under my mandate, and together they support nearly 50,000 researchers and research trainees.
Foundation for Innovation and Genome Canada, which supports research infrastructure and large-scale genomics projects, respectively. To date, the Canada Foundation for Innovation has provided support to about 9,300 projects at 145 research institutions in 70 municipalities across Canada. Last year, more than 26,000 students and postdoctoral fellows used CFI-funded infrastructure to expand their research skills. What's more, our premier federal research organization, the National Research Council, is also having a profound impact on the research community. Last year, it saw 224 patents filed and 162 patents issued. 11 Nobel Prize winners have worked at the NRC at one time or another. It lays claim to international breakthroughs in such fields as nuclear medicine, cardiology technology, crop science, and computer animation. This is only a sample of the NRC's work, and I'm very proud to have it under my mandate. Nous faisons de vrais investissements pour améliorer les.
We are also making real investments that will improve scientific capacity in all federal departments.
Professionals engaged in federal S&T activities, there is a lot of room for collaboration and innovation within the federal government. For example, last May, I worked with the Minister of Fisheries to announce a $197 million investment that will help us make more informed decisions about our oceans, waterways, and fisheries. The same investment is creating 135 new jobs in federal science, the single largest recruitment ever toward restoring ocean science. Monsieur le Président, la science est
Mr. Chair, science is essential to Canada's innovation agenda.
Compete and prosper depends on the creativity and talent of our people. To that end, in June, I launched a panel review of federal support for science to ensure the funding we provide is strategic and effective. I expect to receive the panel's recommendations in the new year. We are also promoting increased collaboration between researchers and companies and encouraging more co-op and internship opportunities. At the same time, we have rolled out a number of funding initiatives to boost our academic strengths. These include $2 billion for research and innovation infrastructure across post-secondary institutions, $95 million per year to the granting councils to support discovery research, the largest increase in a decade, and $900 million for transformational research projects under the Canada First Research Excellence Fund. In October, I also launched a competition for 11 Canada Excellence Research Chairs, at least 2 of which will be in clean and sustainable technologies. And just last week, I announced a $12 million federal investment in the stem cell network to support research in up-and-coming areas of regenerative medicine. Investments like these also transform our understanding of the challenges and opportunities related to stem cells. Ces investissements sont essentiels pour nous aider.
These investments are key to develop and implement sound public policies.
With our government's commitment to evidence-based decision-making and in promoting Canada's leadership on the international stage. To this end, I have also taken part in several high-level meetings in China, Japan, Belgium, and Germany to promote Canadian science and to see what other countries are doing well and to build new science partnerships. And in September, I attended a White House ministerial meeting on Arctic science. In all of these places, people are eager to know about Canada, about our vision, our openness, and our plan for the future. That plan involves creating opportunity for researchers, especially for women, Indigenous peoples, and other underrepresented groups. La diversité est un facteur.
Diversity is an important factor in the creative potential of individuals, organizations, and nations.
Absolutely must take action to remove the barriers preventing women from pursuing careers in science. To this end, we have reinstated the UCAS, that's the University and College Academic Staff Survey, which will inform policy decisions that concern university researchers and faculty. Moreover, in the 2016 Canada Excellence Research Chairs competition, we have instituted new requirements that will strengthen the equity and diversity of the program. Mr. Chairman, from the Arctic to marine biology to quantum computing, and from food security to regenerative medicine, one thing is constant. Canada's world-leading research is fueled by incredible talent, openness, and diversity. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, the Innovation Agenda's success will allow science to play a prominent role in our decision-making and our investment choices.
On the momentum of what we have accomplished in the past year, thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much, Minister Duncan, and we're going to go right into it. Please be mindful of time. Mr. Longfield, you have 7 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Dr. Duncan, for being with us and for what you've done for the portfolio in such a short time. I'm looking at the supplementary estimates with $64.8 million going to the granting agency, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. I'm thinking, how does this compare over the past few years? I'm looking at the need for civil society in Canada to contribute to civil society, and a lot of that happens within the universities when we discuss critical thought and ways to enhance civil discourse. I think you'll find that this committee has mostly civil discourse. Mostly we're focused on problems, and we're at our best when we do that together. So could you maybe elaborate a bit on where social sciences and humanities research plays into what the world needs more increasingly in civil society?
That really important question. I'll just begin by explaining how we fund research in this country. So the majority of research is funded through the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, CIHR, through the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council, SSHRC, and through the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, NSERC. I was really proud that in Budget 2016, we gave a top-up to the 3 federal granting councils of $95 million. That was the highest top-up in more than a decade. CIHR received $30 million, NSERC received $30 million, SHRC received $16 million, and the Research Support Fund received $19 million. I was also very proud that we started to close the gap between CIHR, NSERC, and SHRC. So there was a closing of the gap, which points to the importance of social science research. This is about the science that tells us how we relate to one another, how we relate to society. And, you know, one of the areas SHRC's doing important research is looking at immigration and refugees. And of course, we were so pleased to bring over 25,000 people from Syria, new Canadians.
On the youth internship program, that's something very interesting when we look at engaging youth in internships, something that we looked at in our manufacturing study as well. How does this represent an increase over previous years, the investment in youth? And is there a goal of how many internships we want to support going forward?
Thank you again for this really important question. I think everyone around this table wants more jobs. We want more opportunities for our youth. Under the previous government, we saw the highest rates of youth unemployment in Canadian history. And I've been an MP for 8 years, and in those 7 years, it really changed who was coming into my office. More and more, it was about people looking for jobs, and particularly our youth. They would have a diploma, they would have a degree, they would have 2 degrees, and they still couldn't get jobs. So I think anything we can do to give our youth an opportunity to hit the ground running when they transition from education through to employment, the better. In Budget 2016, we announced $73 million for new work integrated learning opportunities. We also have these opportunities through the Industrial Research Assistance Program. I've met some of these incredible young people. You know, they've had their opportunity, and because of it, they want to pursue a life in science.
Yep. Thank you. And some of those hopefully are females.
Thank you. Can I talk a bit about
Please,
women?
I think we have about 40 seconds left.
You've got a minute and a half.
Oh, we're going 7. Okay, perfect. Over to you.
Thank you. Since I took on this mandate, I made it very clear that I would work to increase the representation of women, Indigenous peoples, those with disabilities, and other underrepresented groups. And if you look at the numbers in Canada, young women now earn about 50%, well, close to half of the undergraduate STEM degrees, science, tech, engineering, and math. They earn about a quarter of the engineering degrees. But as you go up the graduate degrees, there's fewer. So by the time you get to the PhDs, they're 33% of the PhDs in science, compared to 49% in the UK and 46% in the US. And I just want to mention the workforce, because in 1987, women accounted for 20% of the STEM workforce. Today, it's only 22%. In 2016, surely we can do better.
Not much progress. We've got just a little bit of time, about 30 seconds. I know you've been traveling around Canada and you've been around the world, and you've looked at areas where Canada can excel, in fact, where we can be #1. Could you highlight any of those areas for us for maybe our future studies?
Thank you. Absolutely. Canada, I'm awed, inspired, overwhelmed every time I travel by our Canadian research. Having said that, there's a few areas I would highlight: agriculture and agri-food, brain, photonics, quantum, regenerative medicine, but really, as I come from the university, I think I know the university, and the research that's being done by our researchers is world-class.
Certainly is. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I will take that extra 30 seconds. Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Dreeshen. You have 7 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Minister, for being here today. Your government promised an evidence-based policy approach to policy making, yet the Minister of the Environment eliminated more climate scientists than was ever done under the Conservative government. Stats Canada reported the number of scientific and technological personnel at Environment Climate Change Canada would be reduced this fiscal year by nearly 11%, or 406 jobs, compared to 2015-2016. And I know there's always been a lot of talk about the cuts that were made during the Conservative time, but of course we're taking a look at the difference between what happens in a recession, which was in 2008, where every department had taken changes, and you also should recognize that even though there was a cut in 2012 and 2010 to 2012 by 6%, it then grew by 9% the next year. And in 2014, another Harper year, the number of scientists at Environment Canada peaked at an all-time high of 3,830. So there was a lot of talk about the different things that take place, but I think Liberals are finding that it's not easy being green either. But as the Minister of Science, I wonder if you could comment on the decision for job cuts and how your government manages the difference between an ideological interpretation on the file or a science-based opinion for your climate change strategy.
Thank you to my honourable colleague, and we were glad to have you join us when we went to Belgium and to Germany. It was a pleasure to have you then, and it's nice to speak with you today. This is a government that is committed to science and to evidence-based policy. Since you have mentioned the previous 10 years, science funding flatlined under the previous government. We had cuts across scientific departments, and for the first time in Canadian history, we had scientists protesting the death of evidence on Parliament Hill. You've asked a batch of questions here, so I'll try to address them.
Well, the main question was simply the interpretation, ideological interpretation versus science-based. So there's only really the one question.
Well, actually, and then you went through to, you talked about a cut to scientists. I mentioned in my speech that we actually have put the largest hiring in terms of 135 scientists for oceans and water. So your question very specifically is about evidence versus ideology on climate change. Is that the question?
Basically, where I wanted to go with this, Madam Minister, is there's been a lot of discussions about how scientists are going to have this great opportunity to speak out. We saw how that happened when there was discussion about the Zamboni treatment for MS, where scientists were out talking and recognizing that maybe they got ahead of themselves. So these are issues. We have just seen on the procurement side where your government has put gag orders on individuals to be able to speak about things that are happening in procurement, and it's not. That isn't the way we want it to go. So if your intent is to make sure that scientists have this right and this ability to go out and speak, that you're not going to work your way. It sounds good and saying all the right things and going back to issues from before that really were based in fact of how you must handle delicate situations, as I mentioned with the Zamboni approach. But I wonder if that's really where I wanted to go with my question.
Okay, thank you for the question. So the very first act of this government was to reinstate the long-form census. Why? Because we need evidence, fact, and science. The second act of this government was to unmuzzle our scientists. In May, we made good on our promise to put in place a policy regarding communication. And the new policy states that communicators are able to speak in an official capacity without being designated. and that includes scientists. That means scientists can speak in an official capacity where they have direct responsibility and expertise, and on scientific and technical matters related to their work. We know that culture change takes time, so in August, myself and Minister Bryson wrote a joint letter to all ministers and all departments to remind them of this new policy. When I meet with journalists, I always ask if they see a change in terms of communication. And what we've been hearing is that now the scientists are contacting the journalists and offering stories to the point the fact they can't keep up with them. That's a real change and one I'm very pleased to see.
Well, thank you. And of course, there always is the difference between physical science and political science, and the two seem to meld in every once in a while. One of the other things that you spoke of course, and this is something that I appreciate the opportunity to go to Belgium and Germany with you, when we had a chance to talk to researchers in Germany specifically, and we found that the dollars that Canada was investing in research and was actually the same for GDP and the same for population in Germany. And of course, the issue and the concern was that we weren't getting the buy-in from business. And of course, in the discussions, we have 6 time zones that we deal with. We also deal with 13 different jurisdictions, which again, that is the main key. And the third part, of course, is we aren't the draw. Germany is the draw in Europe, and that's where you want to make sure that that's where people and businesses wanted to invest. And of course, in North America, there are other options. And of course, the concern right now that we have is, and earlier today, Jack Mintz was speaking in Calgary and talking about Canada's declining competitiveness. Tax increases are to blame, and again, it could get worse with what is being offered up by the Republican, the new Republican government to take place. So when we had CPP, we had carbon tax, small business taxes that are not going to be aligned to what's happening in the U.S. I wonder if you could comment how we can increase competitiveness when we tie the hands of our businesses.
You have about 15 seconds, sorry.
To address everything from fundamental to applied science, from Max Planck to Fraunhofer's to Jack Mintz, I'll finish by saying I was delighted to meet with Professor Mintz just last week.
Thank you. To Mr. Massey, you have 7 minutes.
Chair, and thank you, Madam Minister. Sadly, with the unmuzzling of scientists, it's the journalists now who are becoming more the rare commodity with regards to what's taking place, especially in print media. I do want to talk, though, about scientists and oceans and water, and move specifically to the Great Lakes. And there has been some allocated funding to the Great Lakes, but has there been by your department any thought, like we have, the Great Lakes Institute in Windsor, of course you have the work done by the IJC. Water is obviously an issue, and that's not only just for health and environmental reasons, but it's going to become very much a political, and already is a political issue for many nations, and including ourselves with the relations to the United States and clean water access and diversion. But we have everything from algae blooms to a series of things. Has there ever been a thought to creating a specialized component for the Great Lakes that would be, I guess, be able to bring in all the partners, the organizations? The mayors have recently advocated for more of a semblance of a group. Has there already been thought that this department actually might take the lead on that?
Yeah. First of all, I'll say thank you for the important question, because water is, of course, a fundamental area. And I used to teach at the university there and have worked with the Great Lakes Institute. So thank you for mentioning the good work they do. This is actually led by NRCan, but I'll use it to talk about this independent review we've undertaken. My job is to strengthen science and evidence-based decision-making. I mentioned we had a good budget for science in Budget 2016, the $2 billion for infrastructure, research and innovation infrastructure across the country, for the $95 million top-up to the 3 federal granting councils, and I could go on. But we want to strengthen science, so we are undertaking the first ever fundamental review of federal support for fundamental science. That panel is a distinguished panel. It's a 9-member panel. It's led by Dr. David Naylor, the former president of the University of Toronto. We have regional representation with Dr. Martha Piper from the University of British Columbia in the West. In the East, it's Dr. Martha Craigo from Dalhousie. Quebec, the chief scientist, Dr. Remy Quirion. It has Dr. Art McDonald, our newest Nobel Prize winner, and Mike Lazaridis of BlackBerry, and the list goes on. The point is they have done a first major consultation with the research community in a very long time. They received 1,200 submissions, and then there were roundtables across the country, so there's another 300, and they're going to make recommendations on how we can improve our support for fundamental science, and they'll report in the new year.
I guess what I worry about, so say for example, like our party here as in Democrats, we've carved out an official critic for the Great Lakes. And that's what I'm worried about, is whether or not there doesn't seem to be in the Great Lakes a concentration or a point lead. There's everything from the economics of transportation on the H2O highway, but there's also the issue of water quality, invasive species, a number of different factors, water quantity, all those things. And I just wonder whether or not, and it seems, I'll be quite frank, because that science seems to get eclipsed no matter what government's here. It's not often the, I guess, the quotable daily top of the line issues at times, but it's fundamental, and our Great Lakes are for not only our economy, but also for our health and well-being in our nation state. And so I worry about it getting continually lost in the files. So I guess my end of my question would be, again, is that has this government considered of consolidating, I guess, a point lead for the Great Lakes, and with science being a major role in that component?
I would have to get back to you because it's an NRCan lead, but I will mention in September we rolled out $900 million for CFREF, and this was for 13 projects across the country, and one of them looks at ocean marine water. But we would be happy to get those numbers to you.
No, that's fine. I think, though, the difference is that NRCan, I mean, for the work it does, it still doesn't have the political clout that the Great Lakes is needed at this point in time. So I'll leave that one at that to consider, but that's kind of my general point, is that it is leaving it to departments and agencies that are don't have that political clout is hurting the ability of it for a lot of different reasons. If I can move quickly to your patents that have filed, 224 as an example in this past year. I mean, there's others that examples you use, 160 patents issued. Do we track them now, though, in terms of like what my concern is, and when we're doing our manufacturing report, is getting patents to be actually manufactured, and if they're goods and services from Canada? Do you track them past issued, or does anybody in the government pact, now that they're issued, to actually getting into the marketplace?
Well, let me talk a bit about NRC then. We have a new president. His name is Ian Stewart. He's the president effective August 2016. He comes with a wealth of knowledge in academia, in government, in science, tech, innovation, and economic development. And I was actually just at the NRC last week for their internal awards, and to see the new applications, not only the research excellence that's being done by the NRC, but also on the application side. And the example I'll give to you, it's a new seat for helicopters that reduces the vibration. Another one was de-icing technologies. Another one was how you teach surgery. So what the NRC does and what we want to see, they have 100 years of research excellence and getting innovations out that benefit all Canadians. We want to see that continue in terms of science excellence, building these clusters and helping industry.
Yeah, and I guess what our main
10 seconds.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. We're going to run to, we're going to go over to Mr. Johari.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to ask you two general questions. One of them has to do with the increased funding for the 3 federal granting councils, and the other one has to do with stem cell. Okay. So let me start with the increased funding that you announced for the 3 federal granting council. Can you tell us what these additional funds are allocated for? What were the gaps that you felt you need to increase those funds to close? Some of the benefits, and how can it be translated into more jobs, better products, or breakthroughs in certain fields, such as stem cell? Which leads me to my next question when you respond.
Thank you for the question. As I said, Budget 2016 was a really good budget for science. We had $2 billion invested in the Strategic Investment Fund, which is to increase research and innovation infrastructure across our country. And we're already rolling out those projects. There was $379 million for space, $237 million for genomics. We had that top up to the 3 federal granting councils, which is $95 million. As I said, that was the highest top up in more than a decade. I can go on. $50 million for Perimeter Institute, which is one of the foremost theoretical physics institutes in the world. So that $95 million, $30 million went to CIHR, $30 million went to NSERC, $16 million went to SSHRC, and again, we're closing that gap to show the importance of social science research, and then $19 million for the Research Support Fund, and people may not know what that is. There are indirect costs associated with research. It costs money to keep the lights on, to keep the heating, to do air conditioning, and that funding helps offset that. So people will apply for this increase. The research community is excited to have that increase because it's going to allow them to fund more areas. You mentioned stem cells. Last week, I was pleased to announce $12 million for, we announced in Budget 2016, $12 million for the stem cell network. And last week, $9 million was used for 31 new projects and clinical trials across Canada. And why regenerative medicine matters, and I know you have a strong interest in it, is because it allows replace, repair, regenerate damaged cells, tissues, organs, which can be damaged by illness or disease. And there is promise of stem cells. Stem cells are really Canada's science. It was Doctors Till and McCullough who then trained the next generation. That's how you see the stem cell network built. And the great promise, for example, in cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and autoimmune disorders.
Great. So back on the stem cell, you announced last week, as you mentioned, $12 million. And I think this was part of the initial bundle that was already announced as part of the 2015-2016. This was just being released, or was this on top of the initial allocation that was done?
So in Budget 2016, we announced $12 million for the stem cell network. Again, this is Canada's science. There's such promise for the future that I thought it was important to provide that money. And then last week we announced $9 million of that $12 million for the 31 projects and clinical trials across the country.
So I'm going to advocate very strongly for an increase on top of that, very much that we got increase on that for the others. Now, you mentioned that there is a gap, and actually there was a downtrend when it came to stem cell research and the participation of women in that field. As a person who has a daughter, and my daughter is quite interested in the stem cell, can you expand on what initiatives is the government taking to actually close that gap and bring that back up, both from a gender equality as well as the balanced in getting compensated for it?
Thank you for the question, and please give your daughter my best wishes. And we want to see as many young women go into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as well as Indigenous peoples and other underrepresented groups. Again, I have made this a key feature of my mandate. In the spring, we began having conversations with the post-secondary education community. That this is an issue, it needs to be addressed. I don't think a country can afford to lose half its talent. In September, I was pleased to bring back the UCAS survey that was canceled under the previous government after having been going since 1937. Why does UCAS matter? Because come next April, we're going to have data. Are women progressing through the ranks at the same rate as male colleagues? Are they making equal pay? That data matters. In October, we announced 11 new Canada Excellence Research Chairs. These CERCs are important. They're among the most prestigious awards internationally. It's $10 million over 7 years. 11, we've announced 2 will be in clean and sustainable technologies. But with that, we announced new equity and diversity requirements that universities will have to put forward, their equity and diversity plans, and those will be tied to the Canada Research Chairs. And the last thing we did, also in October, was to place all this data. That data is now available on the SSHRC website. We are trying to lead here by taking action on this, but we're also leading internationally. Canada worked with Japan when we went to Beijing for the International Carnegie meeting, and we worked to put forward a motion to study women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it was one of 3 subject areas studied internationally.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Loeb, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Minister, for attending today. One question I had for you was, in your mandate letter, it talks about environmental assessments and using the information found in there to make decisions. One question I had for you is, do you think it's necessary if a municipality is awarded a project that is going to require, say, for example, an environmental assessment, does it make sense that the federal government and the provincial government basically do the same environmental assessment? Do you support that, or do you think it should just be the province does the environmental assessment?
Thank you. And you and I have worked together for a very long time, so it's nice to see you today. Again, this is a government that is committed to science and to evidence-based decision-making. My mandate letter requires that I work with the Minister of Environment and Climate Change to look at to review and reform environmental assessment process. It requires that I work with the Minister of Labour to develop new co-op positions in STEM fields, and to work with the Ministry of Fisheries and Oceans to look at the impacts of climate change on marine Arctic ecosystems. So you've asked about environmental assessments. This is a government that is committed to consultation, and so the consultation is currently out. And
so just so I'm clear, though, the consultation's out right now to reinstitute a federal and an overlapping provincial environmental assessment. Is that what you're looking at?
That's not fair. There's a consultation to ask for Canadians' input onto environmental assessment, and we'll have to wait for the evidence.
Okay. Also inside your mandate letter, talking about using science and scientific information to do other things. I won't quote it specifically, but the question I have for you is, if there are outstanding concerns or issues in certain areas around, say, for example, green energy, the riding I represent, there's a lot of outstanding issues around the impacts that industrial wind turbines have in and around rural areas where there's people living. And Health Canada did a study, and some of the criticisms were that some of the instruments used were out of date. Is this something that you would support to revisit the high-end tools and machinery that are available to do studies like that before the government goes ahead promoting or supporting any more green energy subsidies for, say, for example, industrial wind turbines, just to make sure people's health is safe and sound?
Thank you for the question. You've packed a lot in. You've talked about green energy and industrial turbines and Health Canada. Again, we are a government that is committed to science and to evidence-based decision-making. This would be a question for the health minister regarding the health impacts, potential health impacts.
Well, it would be actually, though, under your department that would actually be conducting the work with yourself and Minister Baines. And what specifically I'm talking about is using, I know in your statements, or one of your answers, you talked about noise studies, and I think it was in regards to rail, perhaps. These types of devices that I'm talking about, is this something that you would make available if there were to be another study, to use the latest and greatest, have your scientists use the latest and greatest to do a study on, for say, example, the impacts of industrial wind turbines?
Ben, the department I serve, along with my colleagues, Minister Baines and Minister Chagger, there are no scientists associated with our department. So if you're looking at potential health impacts, the correct place to go would be to the Minister of Health. Okay. Maybe at a later date, I'll sit down and show you the first study they did with the impacts on that. The other thing is, okay, fair enough. 10 seconds, I can't ask another question, so I'll turn it over to somebody else.
Sorry. For the last question, we're going to go to Mr. Arya.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Minister. Investment in discovery research is quite important. I'm very glad that you are emphasizing it. I would like to quote Dr. Douglas Barber, Distinguished Professor in Residence, McMaster University, in the study conducted in March 2013 by this committee. To quote, he said, "We are at the top in our investment in the knowledge of our people and not matched by any other country. But when it comes to creating value from that knowledge, we are close to the bottom of the list." He also said, "The post-secondary learning environment is commerce averse. Customer is a bad word, sales is a bad word, commerce is a bad word, and profits is really bad." And the third quote from him is, "Commercialization within the academic setting is not viewed in a favorable light. It is possible that students who go on to join the professorate may also view commercialization this way and thus continue to maintain this culture in Canada's post-secondary institution." So my question is, while it's very important that we emphasize discovery research, but not highlighting the need for creating commercial value, maybe it's going to be a problem in the future too. What do you think?
Chandra, thank you for your important question. You're absolutely right. We need both. We need discovery research, and it's a continuum right through to application research. But science is messy. It's not a neat continuum. You may have incremental research, there may be breakthroughs, but we need both ends funded. To that effect, under the previous government, in 10 years, we fell from 3rd to 8th on higher education R&D. On business R&D, we fell from 18th to 26th. I don't like that trajectory. We need to reverse that trajectory. And you talk about, commercialization. Commercialization and application absolutely matter, and I'd like to give you 2 examples. in the CFREF money, we've talked about that $900 million, and we've seen other research on brain. We have an aging population today. And if we look at Alzheimer's disease, which has this terrible human toll, there's also an economic impact. Today, someone is diagnosed once every 5 minutes, and the cost to the system is $15 billion. In 30 years, we're looking at someone being diagnosed once every 2 minutes and a cost of $153 billion. And so we need those applications. We need to understand the science, but we want to find treatments. And the second example I'll give you is quantum computing. Canada has wonderful strengths in quantum computing, and I don't think it's a secret to this committee that, you know, we are in a race to build that first quantum computer.
Thank you, Madam Mr. Chair. I'm done. Thanks. Yep.
Just a quick question, if I could.
For me or for
the
well, Mr.
Chief Science Officer? If you could express, that's something new. How do you see that role playing out and having an impact?
Thank you, Frank. So in my mandate letter, it says I will create the position of a Chief Science Officer. Under the previous government, the position, there was a similar position. It was eliminated. It wasn't eroded. It was actually eliminated. Just weeks after taking on this new role, I began the first consultation. I talked to chief science advisors, chief scientists, chief innovation officers in Australia, Israel, New Zealand, the UK, the United States. Our officials talked to one another. We began a broad consultation across Canada. And, you know, in the 7 years I was here prior to this role, no one ever asked me for my opinion. I made sure that all parliamentarians were asked about this important role. Good ideas don't come from one party only. And I'm pleased to say we received valuable input from over 80 experts, stakeholders, and parliamentarians from across the political spectrum. And in the near future, we will be launching a search for that position.
Excellent. Thank you very much. On that note, I wish to thank the Honourable Christy Duncan for your comments, and thank you for being here today. We will let you guys go, and then as a committee, I've spoken with the Vice Chairs. We will proceed with a vote. We've agreed that we will bundle all of them into one. Okay, so I'm just going to, you guys are good to go. Thank you very much again.
May I just say thank you to the committee for the invitation?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Shall vote 5B under Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, vote 10B under Canadian Space Agency, votes 1B and 10B under Department of Industry, vote 5B under Department of Western Economic Diversification, votes 1B and 10B under National Research Council of Canada, votes 1B and 5B under Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, votes 1B and 5B under Social Sciences Humanities Research Council carry on the vision. Okay. And then do we do this one, that one first, and then we're done, and then just do this. Oh, okay. And then shall I report the supplementary estimates B 2016-17 to the House? Okay. Do we need to vote, or we're done? Then we're done. Oh. Oh. Oh, that was fast. Thank you, and good night all.